This is Rock and Roll English. Real people, real English. Here's your host, Martin Johnston.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Rock and Roll English. Episode number 317, baby. Oh yeah. In today's episode, I speak to a very special guest. Her name is Masha. She is also an English teacher, and we talk about something which is very close to my heart because Masha contacted me and said she would like to talk about her method of teaching English, which is through books, and not just any books, through self-development books, okay? Now, I know lots of people are not fans of these books. If you don't know what they are books that, let's say, try to teach you things about how to become better in some way, maybe a better person, a better parent, whatever. Now, I also thought these books were absolutely ridiculous until I was about 27-ish. But since then, I have been a very big fan of these books. I think because I was such a terrible person, so I needed to develop. I needed to become a better person. And I hope that I have done this. So Masha and I talk about these books, obviously her method. And as you can imagine, I end up talking a lot like usual. Sorry about that. So I share lots of things which I have never shared before. Some things which I would be too embarrassed to share in front of my close friends. So please don't tell them about what I say on this podcast. And it's just a very nice, warm podcast. I always think if you talk about books, it's a good thing, isn't it? So that's what we do. Now, I will talk to you all again at the end. Obviously, there is no vocabulary or anything. It's just a nice chat about books. One last thing, we had a problem with the audio. I say we, I actually mean me, because I forgot to record with my microphone. So we are listening to the Zoom recording. So the audio is not the best, but it's not that bad. I'm sure you probably won't even notice a difference, but you know how much I love audio. So apologies for the audio quality today. That was my fault. But anyway, here is the conversation. Happy listening. Hello, Masha, and welcome to Rock and Roll English.
Hello, Martin. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much for coming. I'm very pleased to talk to you because what we spoke about in our pre-podcast chat, your teaching methodology is something which interests me a lot. But before we get to that, just tell us quickly who you are.
Well, I'm an ordinary English teacher who lives in Spain. Now I've been teaching English for about 20 years. And now I teach in a public school for teens. And also I teach English for adults, like private tuition. And actually, I'm interested in teaching English through reading, especially non-fiction books.
Yes. So maybe explain to people what non-fiction books are, just in case anyone doesn't know.
Well, non-fiction books are those books that teach you some valuable things. They entertain and make you learn a lot of things. These books are on different topics like personal development, spirituality, marketing, whatever you are interested in, you can find it in non-fiction books.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm actually a big fan of non-fiction books, and I must admit, so in my life, for the first 25 years, I didn't read anything except if I was made to in school, obviously. And then from about 28, I started reading these like self-development non-fiction books, because before that, I thought they were the stupidest thing in the world. I thought whoever reads one of those books is a complete idiot. And now I find myself reading them. I don't get to read as much as I would like to, but I think they've changed my life. So what's your story with these
Well,
non-fiction books?
pretty much the same. I
Right.
hated reading when I was a teen. Really,
Hmm.
I thought it was a waste of time. Even my father bribed me with eating out and buying me some new clothes just to make me read one single book. And it was impossible, even though. And I've read a lot of, I read a lot, but the books that I was not interested in completely, when you get your graduation for master's degree to teach English, for example, you have to read a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And then what I did, I read them, I passed exam, and I forgot
Of
what I read.
course. Hmm.
And then maybe 5 years ago, I started reading these nonfiction books. I thought, why not to try it? Because I was in the period of my life looking for the answers,
Hmm.
and I didn't have any tool
Yeah.
to help myself become a happy person and be satisfied with my life. So I thought about the books. Why not to try it?
Hmm.
And what about you, Martin? Why did you start reading the books of that type?
Strangely enough, it was actually someone who is on the podcast who maybe you won't know, but listeners will know, called Dan the Man, who told me about these books, one book in particular. And then he said, read this. And like you, I thought, why not try? And so then I did. And then since then, I have read almost nothing else. And some of my friends, even now, kind of still laugh at me for reading these books. And the way I answer that is I ask them, do you think you are perfect? Are you a perfect human being? To which obviously everybody says no. So then I say, okay, so if you're not perfect, surely you want to improve, no? And then they would say, yes. And then I say, well, how do you intend on doing that? Because when you read these books, it gives you strategies, new ideas, and to help you improve. To obviously, I don't think it's perfect for anyone. I don't think it's possible for anyone to become perfect, but to constantly improve. Because when I finished university, I thought that was it. Like, I didn't need to learn anything else again in my life. I thought, I don't need to read any books. I don't need to do anything. And for the first few years after university, that's very much what happened. I would just sit at home and watch football for 6 hours on a Sunday. And when I think back to that period, I just think, my God, what was I doing? I was just wasting my life.
Yes, absolutely. It happened to me the same. I was looking for graduation, like at last, I've done it. Now I can teach and I can stop learning. Well, no, I was mistaken, absolutely mistaken at the time.
Exactly. And I've actually recently got into audiobooks because I've always found them quite difficult. And even now I do, if it's not the person that wrote the book reading it. When the person that wrote the book is reading it, then I can listen. If it's just a computer voice, then I can't. But I have very little time now with 2 young children to sit down and read. So I often find myself doing house chores, like the washing up and like putting the toys away. And that often takes an hour. So I often listen to one of these books.
But don't you find that it's difficult to keep the knowledge when you read, when you only listen?
It is. In fact, I'm actually listening to some that I have actually already read. Because I like to underline things, etc. But now I'm listening to ones which I've already read because they just put me in a better mood
and refresh.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So they just make me feel better. So I go to bed happy instead of going to bed like, oh God. So that's my tactic.
Well,
but
it's a good activity to listen to audiobook. Absolutely. Yeah. And if you combine both things, reading and listening at the same time, would be even better.
Yeah, I've heard people talk about this actually. That's definitely a good thing to do. So how do you merge this with teaching then? Tell us about your methodology, because it's something I have actually considered myself quite a few times, but I've never really come up with how to do it. So,
Well, I'm organizing the book club, a flexible book club where people decide what they want to read. It's should be in nonfiction for sure. And then we meet twice a month for online discussion. And during the months, there is a Telegram group where we communicate, we share our ideas, opinions, we learn the language during this period. So it's like they do not disconnect from learning. And especially this is helpful because people usually cannot maintain this reading routine. And when there are other people who read, they motivate each other, and give any strategies, hacks, how to keep reading.
Absolutely. Yeah. In the Rock and Roll English family, which is the membership area to the podcast, we also have a book club. And very often I'm the one that doesn't read the book, but there have been times when I have read the book. And yeah, knowing other people are reading and then you can meet up with them to discuss it is extremely, extremely motivating. The problem is I put something for people to vote which book, and I have suggested many times non-fiction books, but
nobody wants
them.
Well,
it's always a kind of story. So that's
people want to entertain themselves.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is a type of activity that people like, spending time reading something. But if you can combine entertainment and learning something useful, why not to do these two things at the same time?
Yes, exactly. So how many books? So you said you meet 2 times a month. How many books do you read?
A month, one book.
One book. So you meet 2 times, but you discuss the same book 2 times.
The same book, exactly. Different parts.
Okay.
People do not have stress because the thing is, you can read what you want and discuss what you want when you come to the session.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's the same at the book clubs that I have attended, because sometimes they do it without me. But when I'm there, for example, once I didn't finish the book, but I was still able to contribute. And the first time we did this, we actually read Animal Farm by George Orwell, which, is a fiction book, but I think there are lots of things you can learn from that book. And I remember I was having difficulty reading that because I decided to read it in Italian just to give myself an extra challenge. And one of the great things I think about reading a book, well, there are a few things, like the sense of accomplishment when you finish the book. There aren't many greater feelings than when you close that book and you think,
I've done it.
I've done it. Yes. Yay. That's a great thing. And when you break it down, like lots of people say, book's too long, etc. But I remember specifically for that book, I remember saying, I don't have time. And the book's not very big, that Animal Farm. I think it's about 100 pages, maybe a little bit more. And then I just remember thinking, if I read 10 pages a day, I can do this in 10 days. So once you set yourself a target like that, so a normal book, a normal non-fiction book, I would say is about 250 pages. Would you agree?
Well, normally, yes, they are
around
quite big.
Around about that. Yeah. So if in 1 month, that's less than 10 pages a day. So you can read a book a month. With less than 10 pages a day.
And you can pick up a shorter book, like, for example, if you know Robin Sharma, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. Have you read it?
I haven't, but funnily enough, that is a book I suggested in the book club.
It's a fantastic book.
But it didn't win, unfortunately. No. So
they don't know what they are losing. Really.
Right. So yeah, I missed out on that one. Yeah.
So this book made a great impact in my life, really,
Right.
because it's really really beautiful story.
And okay, let's talk about this then. What books have made an impact on you, and for what reason?
Mm. This one is number one.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically because it talks about what are priorities in life and
Mm-hmm.
how to eliminate unnecessary things.
Yeah.
And it resonated with me because it's the story about the lawyer who changed his life completely and find the purpose. Another one could be maybe Atomic Habits, James
Mm-hmm.
Clear, very classical, that teaches you the importance of a habit and a small action to get big results. And this is super important in learning a language.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Another one that I liked very much was Building Your Story Brand by Donald Miller.
Yeah, I've read that book. Yeah.
Yes. What do you think about it?
Yeah, no, it was a really good book and made me think about my business, like Rock and Roll English. And so they mention in the book that you need to be able to explain to someone in basically one sentence what you do. And it took me years to think of that sentence. And even now, I sometimes have difficulty, but it really changed the way I thought, because I thought, right, what am I doing? Okay, how can I explain this to people? So that's more of a like marketing book though, isn't it? Which again, I read lots of books about marketing, business, because when you're in this industry that we're in, you have to learn to do many things. You have to learn how to market yourself. You have to learn how to write
Absolutely.
emails. You have to learn how to create graphics, create videos, everything. So every time I have to do one of these things, generally my first thing is go to Amazon and buy a book.
That's right. When you have a question, there is always the right book with
Yeah,
the answer you need.
exactly. Um, one of another book which I have read and that I'm listening to again now is, I can't remember his name now, but it's called Think Like a Monk. Have you heard of this one?
Heard about it, but I have never read it. No, not
Because
yet.
I love books like that have lots of stories in them, which I think that always stay with you. So lots of, especially monk stories, they've always got a lovely like meaning behind them. One of my favorite ones is, so two monks were sent on a very long journey and they had to go, but on this journey there was only one rule, that they were not allowed to talk to women. So they set off, were walking along, and then they arrived at a bridge, and there was a woman on one side who couldn't cross the bridge, and she was crying and said, "My son is over there. He needs my help. Please, please, can you help me?" One monk said nothing, didn't speak to her. And then the older monk just picked her up, crossed the bridge, put her down. She said, "Thank you so much." He didn't respond and kept walking. And then the younger monk, for the next 10 hours in his mind, was saying, why did he do that? He spoke to a woman. We're not allowed to speak to women. And said, finally, couldn't bear it anymore, said, "Why did you do that? Why did you talk to that woman?" And he said, "My brother, I put that woman down 10 hours ago. You are still carrying her in your mind. You need
That's
to
right.
let go." Things like that, I think, I don't know, I just remember those stories forever. And that's the great thing about these stories.
Yeah. And how do you share everything that you learn from the book or with your friends? Do you talk about the insights that you learn from the books or
I would generally be too embarrassed to tell my friends because they would probably laugh at me.
yeah,
Which,
that's what happens.
yeah, I know it's strange, isn't it? That even if I tell my book, some of the some, if I tell my friends some of the books I read, they would immediately laugh. But I do always tell my wife. She is the one person who I always
Okay.
enjoy telling these
Does she
stories
read?
to.
Does she read the books?
Not the ones I do, no. And my wife is Italian, so I buy the books generally in English. So she would have to read it in Italian. And then I have the added challenge of telling her about this book in Italian. Yeah, exactly. And so before I had children, I've actually got one thing I love to do is buy notepads. So I underline everything in the book, like the interesting things. And then when I finish the book, I take my notepad and I write like my takeaways from that book. So I've got like 4 or 5 notepads. And every now and again, I just flick through them and have a read. And again, that is a really uplifting experience. But all of this is before I had children, because then when you have children,
You don't have time.
no, exactly. So before, for example, I read books about creating a strong morning routine. I used to do that. I used to wake up early, go to bed early, wake up early, go to the gym and do something great, like read like 10 pages of a book. And by 8 a.m., I was thinking, like, this is the best day ever. And I was really like mentally prepared and felt physically strong. Now I go to bed late because that's the only time I can sleep.
Children go to sleep early.
So no, what I wanted to say was I go to bed late because the evening when they are sleeping is the only quiet time. So I work in the evenings. I go to bed late. They wake up early. So I'm immediately tired and I'm immediately on the back foot. So instead of like me, another thing that I read in a book called by Jim Quick. Have you heard of him?
No.
Okay. I can't remember the name. I think it's called Quick Learning. He spoke about a thermometer, which takes the temperature of a room, or a thermostat, with a thermostat being the thing which sets the temperature. So he said, like, what are you? Are you the person that sets the temperature in the room to say, like, this room will be 20 degrees? Or are you the thermometer, the thing that receives it?
What a great metaphor. I like it.
Whilst before, I definitely was the thermostat. These days, I very much feel like the thermometer. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So you do these, you said book clubs with, is it an online thing that you do?
Yes, it's absolutely online.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so tell us where people can find out more about you then, if anyone wants to take part in your book club.
They can follow me on Instagram if they want, English to Freedom.
Okay.
My account, or they can see videos on YouTube, the same channel. Then there is a link in my Instagram where they can subscribe for the book club and leave their information. So then I can contact them afterwards.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so I will put links to all of this in the show notes. So thank you very much for coming on, Masha. It's been a pleasure talking to you about this. I always find when I find someone that reads these books, I have an immediate connection with that person, and I could talk all day because I feel like someone understands the love of
the
these
same
books.
language.
Yes,
absolutely correct. Yeah, that's why we sometimes change our friendship, our friends, because we change and the people around us also become different, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So thanks again for coming on, and we hope to speak to you soon.
Thank you very much, Martin.
Thanks a lot. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so there I was talking to Masha about self-development books. Remember, you can check out Masha on Instagram, etc. The links are in the show notes, so go to rockandrollenglish.com podcast episodes,
go to the latest episode and you can check her out. So yes, I did share a few things there which I have not shared before, and things that maybe my friends that are often on the podcast would probably laugh at me for. So I hope they don't listen. But I'm happy to share this with you, and as I mentioned, am a big fan of those books. So if you have never read one before, I would certainly suggest doing it. So thanks everyone for listening. I will talk to you all very soon, but in the meantime, just keep on rocking, baby.
Thanks so much for listening to Rock and Roll English. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit rockandrollenglish.com and facebook.com/rockandrollenglish. We'll catch you next time.